Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We have some fantastic content for you today. We were sitting in here kind of prepping right before, the webinar here, going over, slides and sharing screen and making sure everybody was good with our tech check. And I was just sitting here watching, the number of y'all in the waiting room just kind of ticking in. And that number, bigger and bigger. I was just telling them this might be one of our higher registered webinars. So it just shows, that this is a topic that definitely hit a pain point, I think, for many of you. How do you improve your sales process? How do you wedge out the incumbent? How do you become a better salesperson? I feel like it's a hat that a lot of us maybe haven't worn in the past, is being a salesperson. We've been the expert in, our industry. We've been, the technician, the owner, but having to put on a sales hat, I mean, that's a big, heavy hat to have to put on with minimal training. And so we have a fantastic training for you guys today, about how you can use the wedge technique. I've got a couple different, specialists on here today. I've got Ray Green on here. He's going to kick us off and really, give us a really high level overview of the wedge technique. You're going to be able to walk away, from that content, take some notes with some questions that you can start using today, when you start to talk to your prospects. After that, I've got Amit from FirmGuard coming on, specifically talking about how to use a certain tool in order to wedge out your competition. And so we're going to start big picture, with Ray, and then we'll get into something actionable that you'll be able to actually, leave this webinar today, with a tool to use. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Allison Felber. I'm the editor-in-chief here at MSP Success, and I love my job because one of my biggest things that I get to do is just put together content for you, for the MSP, that help you be a better business owner, a better entrepreneur, a better leader, make your business more profitable. And so all day, every day, I just get to do that, and I love it. And so this is one example, of that, is being able to bring together, this group of experts in order to teach you how to sell better, how to wedge out your competition. So before I get going with Ray, though, I want Amit, I didn't prep you too much for this, but can you just go ahead and can you throw up that slide with the scan? Yeah, bounce around. Sorry, I promise we did a tech check. Yeah. So I know that a lot of times on this webinar, you may be sitting here, paying attention, you're into it, and then all of a sudden your phone rings, or a ticket pops in, or you get distracted, or you get disconnected. I do not want you guys to miss out on this. And this is not like, I'm not I'm not pitching this. This is so that you don't miss out. So everybody go ahead, just grab that firmguard.com/TMT. You don't have to do anything with it yet. Just put it into your browser. We'll talk about it later on today, but this is for those of you who have ADHD, squirrel syndrome, or something happens and you need to pop off. Just put this in your browser and I'll explain it later, okay? So that's your first action item. We're going to be a little bossy on this webinar. Ray's going to be bossy with how to be a better salesperson, and Meet's going to show you how to actually do that. I'm telling you right now, I'm going to be bossy. Go ahead and just take firmguard.com/TMT, throw it into your browser. We'll do what we need to do with it later. So thank you, Amit. Appreciate you kind of stepping in and doing that real quick. So like I said, first up, I have Ray Green. I don't want to take any more time from him. He is an expert in residence at TMT, our sister company, in sales mastery. He's, worked at a lot of different investment groups, worked with hundreds of MSPs and training them on how to become a better salesperson. So Ray, floor's yours. Let's learn more about the wedge technique.
All right. Well, I feel like you're talking to me, kind of like you said, if you have ADHD or short attention span, like that's me. But I am the opposite of many of you on this. Like, if you are technical and trying to learn sales, I am sales and trying to be as technical as you. So today what we're going to talk about, let me share my screen here. And if I'm at least technically proficient to do this, then you guys should be seeing my screen. So
you're all good, Ray.
Okay, excellent. All right, so what we're going to talk about is unseating the incumbent, and there's a technique that we're gonna go through today, how to drive clear differentiation and win more clients. Right, we're all here to get more sales, get more deals, help more businesses, and we're going to talk about how you can do that. Now, wouldn't it be awesome if every prospect in your pipeline, like everybody that you had an opportunity to talk to, had an MSP a provider already that they couldn't stand, right? Like, the situation. You walk in and they've got, crappy response times. They've got, vulnerabilities in their network. The provider they've got is dropping the ball on projects. Maybe they're nickel and diming them. And when these scenarios come up, the sales just a lot easier, right? Because they know already, they're like what they don't like. They know what the pain is that they're trying to make go away. They know that they should be getting better service. And that's great, right? Like, but as you know, that's not always the case. A lot of times you've got people, like maybe you've got a marketing campaign going and your SDR is calling and setting people up for like a free assessment or a free conversation, like something. You've got an offer and they take you up on the offer, but they kind of think that they're satisfied with the provider that they have, right? At least they think they are. And things seem fine. They don't have any like, massive frustrations with their current provider. There's no obvious reason to change. And if I've learned anything in 20 years of sales, it's you've got to have pain in order to close a deal, and you've got to have urgency in order to get it to the finish line, right? So if you don't have those things, it gets a lot more challenging. So the question is, how do you unseat an incumbent, an MSP, when their client isn't completely frustrated already, right? Like, how do you create clear differentiation between yourself and the incumbent? And the best sales tool that I have learned to do this is the wedge. And by the end of this webinar, you're going to know what that is. You're going to know why it works, how to use it to get more deals. And at the end here, we'll have a slide on how to wedge proof your business to keep those clients that you work really hard to win. Okay. So first thing, I'll start with, like, what's the purpose of the wedge? It's a unique sales tactic. It's actually developed by Randy Schwantz. So this isn't something I created. He's got a book called The Wedge, and last I checked, I think it's like $100 on Amazon or something. Well worth it. But he developed this technique, and it was to do two things primarily. The first was to break the relationship with the incumbent service provider. Okay. And then the second reason for it is to create clear differentiation between you and your competitors in general, but specifically the incumbent. But you don't do that by attacking the current provider directly. Okay, like you don't tell them, hey, they suck, like they're not doing their job. You don't do it by pointing out every weakness that you think the incumbent has, and you don't even do that necessarily by bragging about yourself. Well, not directly. Okay, you do that with the wedge, which are basically really carefully crafted questions. We're going to keep coming back to this part of it. It is a question that helps create this differentiation. Okay, so imagine you're in your sales process. You're doing your standard discovery questions. You probably have some technical questions that you ask about, how many machines, things like that. And then you get into the normal discovery that we teach at TMT. Like, what problems do they have? What frustrations are those problems causing? Like, what's the pain from the problem? And then how's the current provider tried to solve or rectify some of those challenges? But then you use the responses that you're getting, and you use those to stretch the gap, is what I call it, which is where they're at today and where they want to be. We want to stretch the gap. And these are basically questions that make the prospect realize on their own that their current provider, their current MSP, isn't meeting the mark, right? And sometimes those questions are going to be about issues that the prospect has already told you about. Okay, so they've talked about some pains or some challenges, and that's where the wedge is like a reactive tool, is what we call it. And you're using it to take what they've told you to like agitate that and stretch the gap. Other times you're gonna like use these questions to focus on issues that they may not even know that they have, like a latent pain. And these are problems, like, or potential problems that they aren't even aware of yet, right? And it's your job, in using the wedge technique, it's your job to bring those pains to the surface. And it's different than most of the other questions, because, as you know, like from what I've seen and talking to hundreds of you, one of the toughest challenges in the MSP space is differentiating yourself, right? Most providers, we've listened to hundreds, not thousands of sales calls. Most providers are basically saying the same thing. They're saying we're faster, we have better support, we have the best tools. But to the prospect who isn't as technical, like so on the other side of the table, it just blends together, right? They don't actually feel a difference. And what that means is there may not be like a big enough reason for them to make a switch, right? Or worse, I'm sure you've heard this story before. You go through the process, your entire process, you get them a proposal, you've done your discovery, you've shown them like what you can do, and they take it back to their current provider who just says, oh yeah, we can match that. Like, oh, sorry, we'll do better next time. Okay. And then you end up losing the deal. And that's where the challenge comes in. So the wedge helps you stand out. It helps like address some of these things. And you're not just saying the same thing. Okay. You're not just saying, we're faster, we're better, we're smarter. You're using very targeted questions in targeted questions in a targeted way. We're going to get into them. And the questions are intended to, and like I said, I'll show you this, but they're intended to lead that prospect to come to their own conclusions instead of you telling them stuff, which at the end of the day helps you stand out and not get commoditized. Okay. Now, instead of, like we're talking about here, like instead of, you just telling them how great your service is, right? These better questions that I'm talking about, you're going to ask saw Tanya jump in. Hope everything's okay technically. You're going to ask questions that, first of all, paint a perfect picture. Okay, what you're going to do in these questions that I'll give you examples is you're going to help them see what they could be doing by painting like a very vivid picture. And then as you do that, you're going to assume that that's the experience that they're currently getting. And then as you get to the question, it's going to lead them to kind of draw their own conclusions, right? And when they do that, if you do it right, they're going to go, huh, I'm not getting that today. Okay, so I don't know if you've ever had like a situation where someone asks you a question and just by asking the question, kind of there's this light bulb moment, like an aha moment. And maybe by asking that question, it causes you to rethink your approach or like have come to a different perspective. That's basically what we're doing here. Like we're crafting very specific questions that guide the prospect to realize the gaps in their current service. And it's not like mind control, but it's kind of close. You're helping them see the flaws in the current situation that they have and making them confront those things. And we'll go through a few examples, but let me tell you why this works first. What makes this really powerful is that them coming to their own conclusion about something is always going to beat you telling them something. Because even if you've positioned yourself as not just another salesperson, or you've positioned yourself as a consultant, as we like to have people do, like, you don't want to come in as just another salesperson. Even if you've done that, they still know that you want to sell them something, right? So when you tell them something, it's not going to have the same impact as you planting a seed in their mind and them going, like they came to their own conclusion on something. They believe them more than you all the time, no matter what. That's why this works so well. Okay. And there's two wedges. We'll go through both of these, but there's basically two wedges. One is the reactive use, right? So like I was saying earlier, it's when the problems are like that they're dealing with, they've told you some of these things, right? Like they've alluded to it in some way, like they've talked about the slow response times, or they've talked about the feeling like maybe there's some security risks, or they're not getting the follow-up from their current provider that they want. And so you use the wedge to agitate that pain, to stretch that gap, to magnify that pain and their dissatisfaction. And then there's the proactive use, right? And this is like, I joke sometimes, this is like ninja level. Okay. Like even if they don't think they have a problem, you can ask questions that proactively surface those things, like bring them to the surface, things that they weren't aware of. So like an example of this is a couple of months ago, I went to my standard doctor. I've seen him for 15 years. and I'm doing, just like a prescription refill, type of visit. And he's like, and he checks my heart and he goes, has anyone ever told you you have a murmur? I said, well, shit. So I didn't have a problem. Now I have a problem, right? You've asked a question. I go, okay, well, now I have a problem. So you're bringing it to the surface. It's not latent anymore. And like in both of these, like your goal, again, paint the perfect picture of what things should look like, ask them questions, and because you're assuming that they have it. And then by seeing that, they come to that conclusion. Okay. So let me give you a few examples. Let me jump in here. All right. So we'll give you a couple on the reactive side, right? So this is if they've hinted at a pain or alluded to a pain or know it directly, and you're trying to agitate, you're digging in a little bit. So let's say they mentioned slow response times. You can ask a question, something like, oh, okay. Like, so when your last provider like missed a critical service window for you, and they came back, they got it fixed, and they gave you a root cause analysis of why that window was missed, and then they gave you the roadmap for how they're going to take action on what's going forward. How satisfied were you with that plan? Right? Like, you didn't ask, oh, did they fix it? You didn't ask like a yes or no question. Like it was, oh, I'm assuming that what they've done by screwing up here is they've identified the root cause, told you what it is, given you a real plan to actually fix it. And when you assume that that's happened and they go, well, I mean, they didn't do any of that for us. You go, oh, okay. Right. So like the question is in and of itself, bringing them to a conclusion. It forces them to think about like, what are those shortcomings? Okay. A second example here. If they mention like network outages, I'm sure you've heard this before. It's something similar. It's okay, after the last network failure and your provider got you up and running, I'm sure immediately. And they gave you the plan showing how they were going to prevent those future outages. How actionable was that plan in your view? How did you feel about that plan? I'm not asking about the network. I'm not asking about even the follow-up. It's like, hey, the plan that they gave you to fix it, like, what was your view of that? I'm assuming that they've already done this, right? And it gets them to focus on that follow-up root cause. Now, remember I said there's reactive. So that's if they tell you something and using it to agitate that pain. Then there's proactive, right? This is, we're gonna plant the seed in your brain and have you come to the conclusion that there may be a problem. So they haven't necessarily told you something in discovery that you're going to use, but it's like an advantage of yours or a disadvantage of theirs. And you ask, something like, hey, so when your last provider did conducted a security audit and found, any vulnerabilities that were there, and then shared that report highlighting exactly what they were and the plan that they had to prioritize how we were going to get all those things fixed. Did you feel like you had all the information you needed to be confident that you were going to be safe going forward? Right. So you're getting them to recognize gaps that if their provider's not doing this, then they're going to sit back and they're going to go, it's like not quite the same, but it's, has anyone ever told you had a murmur? Well, shit, I didn't know I had that problem before. Now I do. So another example, proactive Wedge. When your provider last trained your team on cybersecurity best practices, and they created the plan to make sure that it was tailored to your needs, like, understanding your team and where you were, and then, make sure that it's actually adhered to afterwards. How happy were you with those results? Right? Because I'm assuming that one, they've done the training. I'm assuming that they've, customized it to some degree and this is if you do this, right? Like you're trying to highlight the pain because you're, either exploiting some of the disadvantages or the service that they're not getting elsewhere, or reinforcing some of your strengths. So you want to get targeted with these, like, we just ask these per se, but this is an example of trying to highlight something. If this is a strength of yours, how you can highlight that without having to say it directly, and this just gets them to think about that on the proactive support too. So these are a few examples. Like the core of this, you need two things really to do this very, very well. The first thing is know what you do well, right? This isn't just about saying, hey, we're faster. It's about like digging deeper into what makes your service unique. Like I'm not going to ask a wedge question about something that I'm not doing, but I'm going to identify what do we do really well that I know most providers don't do, that I can craft a wedge question or two that highlights that, right? Is it proactive monitoring? Is it your ability to solve problems before it happens? Is it transparent reporting? Is it speed? Is there something that you do different? And you need to know exactly what you do better than your competition, because that is the basis of your wedge, right? So that it can play into your unique selling proposition. I have a friend with an IT company, and onboarding was one of their specialties. Like the internal culture was one of their specialties. So the wedge questions that she's asking are designed around those things. So you need to know what's unique about you. What do you do better than most of your competitors? Okay. Then the second thing that really helps here is if you've done some, research on your competitors, right? Like you need to know where your competitors are weak so you can exploit those things. And this can happen over time. Like the more proposals that you get an opportunity to see, the more times you get to, run a discovery call and hear what other people are doing and not doing really well, you can kind of see where they fall short. In sales, on sales teams that I've run, we used to call them battle cards. We'd start to create, cards, and we'd start to create one pagers that we kind of knew when we ran into this particular competitor, these were going to be their weaknesses and these were going to be their strengths. So you want to do some research on your competition so that oh, I bet they're not doing this, and I know that we do it better, right? If you do this research up front, it allows you to kind of ask these really targeted wedge questions that create the separation that you want between you and whoever you're going up against, the incumbent. And the more specific you are about these things, about what it is that you do and what it is that a lot of your competitors don't, the more effective your wedge is going to be. All right. Yeah, and then highlight them to know the difference. So as an example here, if your tech stack has something genuinely unique, right? Like we're hearing from FirmGuard later, like BIOS endpoint protection, a question that says, hey, cyber attacks like today, like they're not just at the operating and system level or just at the application level. They can actually go before the operating system. Like we call it pre-OS level software that it's responsible for launching your actual operating system. Like things are hitting, at that level right now. So, when your provider gives you a security assessment, just showing like how all your endpoints are protected, like what's your level of confidence that you're protected against those types of attacks that actually bypass most of the standard security measures, right? And so if this is something that's unique in your tech stack, it allows you to create a wedge that you can leverage. Okay. Now here's some common mistakes that I've seen with doing this, because it's not easy. I mean, it really does take some thought. We've trained a lot on this. And, it does, being strategic about what sets you apart, what makes you unique, doing the work on the competitors, and then really sitting down and thinking, okay, how do I ask this question in a very targeted way so that it's not patently obvious exactly what I'm doing, right? And doing that, it's not easy, but it is worth the time if you invest in it. Now, these are some of the mistakes that I've seen working with MSPs who are trying to create this. One is not painting a perfect picture. Okay, this is a big part of this play. Like a big part of this play is being able to illustrate and have them see vividly what it would look like working with you. And if they don't have that, if that context isn't there, it's going to be tough for this to really resonate the way that it should. Another mistake that I see a lot of is turning this into a yes or no question. Like this is not a, hey, does your provider do this? And they go, no. Okay. And then have them come to that conclusion. Like you paint the perfect picture and you want to ask the question in such a way that you're assuming that is what they get. And then you're asking them something about the context of it, not a yes or no question at the end. Like and this is sales training 101. Like you don't want to necessarily ask yes or no questions most of the time. Like you want more discussion, you want more dialogue, you want more context. So you want more open-ended questions typically. But with this specifically, you don't want to end with a yes or no question. Another thing that I see a lot is when it works and then pouncing on it, right? Like actually you lay it out, you paint the perfect picture, you assume that that's what they're getting, you ask what they think, and they go, you know, we're not doing strategic reviews with our provider. They haven't come in and done like a quarterly assessment and helped show how we're, you know, they're going to help us grow the business or save more money. Or, and then what happens a lot of times is people go, oh, well, we do that. Like we do, and they jump on it. And it's just like, and it turns into a sales pitch, and it actually takes away from the impact. So when people come to kind of the revelation on their own, I have found one of the best reactions, the best responses you can actually have is like body language. Like, oh, they're not okay. I mean, that's, you don't have to say it, right? Like your body language, they, you know, picture's worth 1,000 words. So that's one way. But you don't want to jump into this and start saying, well, we do this, and you really don't even want to use this to like jump on the competition. You don't even want to beat them up. Like that's the question's job. You know, when they say, well, you know, we're not doing those types of reviews, or we're not doing that thing, or, you know, that's not what actually happened. That's not the time to say, oh man, they suck, right? Like it's the question has done its job at that point. And then the other one is overuse of this. Like this is if you ask a question in this format 6 times in a discovery call, you're going to lose people, right? This is something to use very strategically. I would say 1, no more than 2. In a standard sales process. Maybe there may be reasons for more, but you don't want to overuse it, because then I can see the format, like sitting on the other side of the table as a prospect, I can see what's happening and why it's happening. So, so you don't want to overuse it. What you want to do is you want to leverage it for your USP. You want to know, what are the 1, 2, or 3 things I do better than almost everybody else that I can prove, that I can show, and that most other people aren't doing, and how can I lean into those? Okay. Now, I told you we're going to talk about what this is, why it works, how you can use it, but also how to protect yourself against it. All right. And because now that you know about this tactic, you go, well, shoot, how do I make sure that I keep all the clients I work really hard to get? One is just regular communication, right? Like don't wait until the end of a contract or the end of a term to check in with your clients. You know, like a regular review, a regular like schedule, like where you're sitting down with them to assess their needs and highlight the value that you're delivering. It goes a long way in, you know, preventing your competitors from being able to sneak in with their own wedge questions. Second thing is, you know, proactive audits. You know, look for ways with your current clients, look for ways to improve their systems before they ask, right? Like the more proactive you are as a provider, the less likely they are going to be to even think about switching competitors or even take an initial offer from somebody else and open the door to it. Third thing here is transparent reporting. You know, so show your clients exactly what you're doing for them. You know, if they see that work, they'll understand the value that you're delivering, and it becomes harder for a competitor to get in there and paint a perfect picture about you not doing what you should be doing, right? It makes it harder for another competitor to have a unique strength on what you're doing if you're transparent about the work that you're doing. And then last here, client education. You know, making sure that your clients know why your service matters, like what is the value that they're getting, and teach them about like the proactive stuff that you're doing and everything that you're doing to help keep their business running smoothly. Because when they're educated, like they're less likely to be swayed by competition that comes in with, you know, their own wedge. So there we go. If you're ready to wedge out your competition, if you have any questions, I've got my email up here. Feel free to shoot me any questions you have about it, because it's a tactic you've got to give some thought to, right? So if you do have any questions, feel free to let me know.
Okay, don't go anywhere though. This is an hour-long webinar. We've got a whole nother set of content right after this. Like I said, Ray's going to talk kind of high level, you know, wedge, and then I've got, you know, Meet coming in for a specific way that you can actually use the wedge technique. So we've got our kind of broader education. I'm sure, you know, you probably wrote down a couple different notes on there, some questions that you can ask. Now let's get practical. Let's actually, you know, see, okay, what is a very practical way that we can use it? So Ray, thank you so much for being on. I know you have to bounce. I'll put his email into the chat in case you guys had any questions specifically for Ray. I was kind of answering some ones on the side while you were presenting. Also, as Amit's going, feel free, keep on typing your questions into the chat or into the Q&A, and we'll kind of answer some of those at the end. So Ray will say ciao, sayonara to you, and Amit, I'm going to bring you on here next.
Adios,
So
thanks,
I've got
Allison.
Amit Dillon here. He is with FirmGuard, the Global Marketing and Business Development, right? At FirmGuard. Did I get that
That's
right? At
yeah,
Phoenix?
that's pretty close. Yep, VP
Yep.
marketing.
Yep. And so Ray and Amit and I have been working over the last couple weeks about, how can MSPs actually use the wedge technique, tangibly. Yes, you've got a couple different questions that Ray gave you as an example. We talked a little bit about how an audit, can also be used as a wedge and drive out your competition using an audit. And so now what I want to do is translate, the concept into action with Amit. And so what he's going to be going over is, and actually, you know what, throw that slide back up again. I promise, I said at the beginning, for those with squirrel syndrome, go ahead, do firmguard.com/TMT. If you didn't do that yet, I know we've, bumped up in registration. So go ahead and put that into your browser. He's going to be showing and talking to you about how you can actually use this secure check audit that you guys are going to get free access to wedge out your competition. So if you or think you may have to bounce out, or if you get disconnected, go ahead and just fill out the form at that URL. You'll get free access to their secure check audit that you can use as a wedge. He's going to talk a lot more about it, but I always like, just in case people have to pop off or get distracted or have to leave, you still are going to be able to get access to this wedge tool. So firmguard.com/TMT. He'll go over it in a little bit more detail, but Amit, I'm going to pass it over to you. Again, taking the concept of the wedge and now practically, how can we use this? And Ray talked about, find the things that are different and unique to you and use those as a wedge. And that's what Amit is going to be talking about, how FirmGuard becomes something unique and different to you that you can use as a wedge. So I'll pop out and leave you to it, Amit.
All right. Hey, Allison. So it was interesting you were mentioning there at the end. Or actually, I think Ray mentioned that the proactive audits was a key thing to wedge-proof your business. And I think it's a perfect segue into the secure check audit, because I'm sure people are doing network assessments all the time, and we'll talk about what this is specifically. But I think this dovetails very well with what Ray said in terms of this is a tool that you can use, the secure check audit, to wedge-proof your business. And so hopefully everybody's gone to firmguard.com/TMT. This is a completely free offer. It is limited, so sign up today or tomorrow. It ends tomorrow at 7 p.m. And it's totally free. You get a 15-day trial, but it's more than an eval. What it is the ability to actually use the tool on your own endpoints or even on your client endpoints, and it's going to give you actionable information about those endpoints that you can use in a wedge. And in fact, here's a question. Ray alluded to this earlier. This is a question that he and I worked on putting together in prep for this, and I think it follows the technique quite well. So I'll read this. So cyber attacks don't just target your operating system and application software. They can go to pre-OS level software that is responsible for launching the OS. Now, one thing that Ray really emphasized to me when we were putting this together was, he said, Amit, you can't use jargon. You want to try and keep it as simple as possible. So, I wanted to talk about BIOS firmware. I wanted to say you can go to, you can use BIOS firmware. But he was like, if you use that, you will intimidate a client. They won't sort of understand what you're talking about. So he encouraged me to use words that they might understand. Now, some might argue that operating system and application software, maybe that's too sophisticated, but most people know, for example, Windows is an operating system. And so if you go to that level, then you say, the question that you ask the provider is, when your provider gives you a security assessment showing how your endpoints are protected, what's your level of confidence you're protected against pre-OS level attacks that can bypass currently available security measures? So by asking this question, you sort of set things up. Probably the client is thinking, what's this pre-OS level thing that he's talking about? And this is where client education comes in. So Ray emphasized that one of the key things to do is you want to educate your client. You want to be a thought leader. And so that's a great opportunity for you to tell them, well, what is pre-OS level software? And so in that spirit, let me spend a few moments sort of educating you, the MSP, so that you can in turn do this with your customers. So the stack you see here on the left side is probably, nothing very surprising, particularly the top level, the OS, Windows, let's say, and the various applications that run on there. You probably talk about those fairly often with your client. You've likely sold them some EDR services to protect them from a security perspective. But you probably have not talked to them or really thought about protecting this layer that's sitting right below the operating system. And it's got, kind of an intimidating name here, UEFI BIOS firmware. Some of you may have heard the term BIOS. That's sort of an older term. The more common, I shouldn't say common, but the current standard for BIOS is called UEFI. Let's not worry about what that is, but just know that if you hear me say UEFI or BIOS or UEFI BIOS firmware, I'm talking about this pre-OS software. This software that, to put it very simply, the moment that you hit the on button on your favorite endpoint, be that a laptop, server, what have you, perhaps the laptop that you're watching this webinar on, the moment you hit the on button, the very first piece of software that comes up is this UEFI BIOS firmware. A lot of people don't know this; they're not aware, but it is a piece of software like any other. And the reason we call it pre-OS is because what happens is it comes up, and the purpose of this software is to examine the hardware, make sure everything is sort of functioning appropriately, and then it is actually what launches the operating system. In other words, the pre-OS software, the UEFI BIOS firmware, it launches the operating system. And that's where the problem can come in. So you've seen this little picture of a hacker we have here. So if that person gets a hold of this software, in other words, hacks it, is able to control it, puts in what we sometimes call a bootkit or a rootkit, they can launch any operating system they want. And they're, of course, going to launch some sort of a rogue operating system, which can wreak havoc on this endpoint, the network, and so forth. I don't think I need to convince anybody that if a hacker gets a hold of the operating system, then they can do anything they want. And so this is really the key here. I like to point out to folks who are not currently protecting the BIOS firmware of their clients, you're really, from a security perspective, only doing 2/3 of the job. You're protecting the OS and the application pretty well, but 1/3 of the entire stack is exposed, and that's clearly not a situation that you want to be in. And so then I often get asked, and it's a very reasonable question. I don't know much about BIOS firmware or UEFI or all this stuff that you're talking about. Is it really an issue? Why should I even think about this? And I think this is probably a pretty good example or call to action that should really make everybody sort of stand up and say, well, hold on, maybe I should be paying attention to this. So this came from the U.S. federal government, from CISA, you're probably familiar with, the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency. So it's part of the Homeland Security Agency. So U.S. federal government, this is about a year ago, August 3rd of 2023, they put this bulletin out. And you can obviously go to this URL here, or if you just go to Google and type in CISA space UEFI, it will come up. And I'll read this particular thing because I think it's pretty illustrative of the problems that you can run into if you don't protect this layer of the stack. So it comes straight from this call to action that CISA put out. So adversaries have demonstrated that they already know how to exploit UEFI components for persistence, and they will only get better with practice. Essentially, what they're saying is, if you're an IT service provider, an MSP or what have you, if you're not paying attention to what's happening at this layer, at this UEFI BIOS firmware layer, you're in for a lot of hurt if you don't do something here. Because adversaries, these are, could be nation state actors, they could be others, they're exploiting it as we speak, and they're only going to get better. And the reason why they're only going to get better is because as an industry, as we've gotten better at protecting the OS and the application layer, hackers, adversaries, in CISA's words, have had to go to other layers of the stack to try and get a hold of a device. And where do you think they're going to go? They're going to go to that unprotected pre-software layer that we call BIOS firmware. And so, obviously I'm here today. The company is Phoenix Technologies. The product that we have designed specifically for MSPs is called FirmGuard. And my colleague, Rob Inman, is going to come on in a few minutes. We'll actually give you a live demo of the product, so you'll get a much better sense. But I want to give you an idea of what the product's about. So there are currently 5 different features within the product, and they all begin with the word secure. So features like secure check, secure config, secure wipe, secure sense, secure beat. These are all FirmGuard features. So whenever you hear us talk about that, think, okay, this is a FirmGuard feature they're talking about. And so, real quickly, secure check, the one here at the top, this is the feature that's all about firmware security. So simply put, think of it like antivirus or EDR for the BIOS firmware layer. So just as you have antivirus or EDR at the operating system and the application layer, this secure check provides the same type of services, but down at the BIOS firmware level. But the product FirmGuard goes well beyond just firmware security. There are a variety of other features that are really more around what we call technician efficiency. One of those is called secure config. And it's listed here in yellow. It's for remote BIOS configuration. And so, if you're a technician, if you've ever had to deal with updating or changing the settings on an endpoint. For example, if you're migrating from Windows 10 to Windows 11, you may have to enable the TPM, and you have to go into the BIOS in order to do that. That can be very painful if you have to go on site or have to get on the phone and try and convince, or not convince, but teach somebody how to do that. It's a very tough experience. We have some use cases on our website that talk about that. But with secure config, those days are gone. Just sitting in your office, you can remotely go and you can change the firmware settings across any type of endpoint, be it from HP, Dell, Lenovo, whoever it might be. And then we have another feature called secure wipe, which is again about technician efficiency and compliance as well. And that's the ability to remotely wipe an endpoint drive. So again, you don't have to ship endpoints around. You don't have to go to some expensive third party to forensically wipe that drive and get a certificate of erasure. Again, Rob will talk about that in a few minutes. And then finally, there are secure sense and secure beat, which are other features which we'll get into. So before I turn things over, I've thrown a lot at you in terms of from a technical perspective, but let's step back up at a high level. So what are the benefits of FirmGuard? What are you going to get as someone who takes advantage of what FirmGuard can offer? And so, one obvious advantage, we've talked about this quite a bit, is security and compliance, right? So protecting that BIOS firmware layer, or really, as we like to say, close that BIOS firmware security gap. And then, compliance goes along with that because, as I showed you, the U.S. federal government has got BIOS, UEFI BIOS firmware squarely in their sights. And so naturally NIST and ISO and the various other standards organizations are going to require compliance around that. So that's already here, and it's only getting stronger. And then, obviously you could potentially reduce your cyber insurance bill as well by having this kind of security. The second major benefit is what we call technician efficiency. And I talked about this a bit, so I won't go into great detail, but the 3 features that we have, secure config, secure wipe, and secure sense, they're all about making technicians who have to deal with client endpoints, saving them time and energy, not having to go on site, right? How expensive is, having to get in a car and drive to a site, even if it's, close by. But what if that site happens to be hundreds of miles away, or in some cases, in a different country? You just can't do it. So, technician efficiency is a key part of it. And then, ultimately, it all comes down to, well, okay, this is great, but how can I make money off of it? And the way you can make money off of it is really the same way that you make money off of EDR, antivirus, or other security tools that your clients can't do without. And so from that perspective, you can fold FirmGuard into that security model that you have. And then I think this last bullet point is really relevant, particularly because we're talking about the Wedge. One of the key things that Ray iterated is a way to wedge-proof your business, and really even to go on the offensive, is to be able to differentiate yourself. Have something that your competitors do not have. And I'm willing to bet that pretty much everybody on the call here doesn't, their competitors don't have something like FirmGuard. They're not protecting at that layer. And so with FirmGuard, you have the ability to not only wedge-proof your business, but actually go on the offense and use it, meaning FirmGuard, as a wedge. And then, this is just another way of looking at our features. It's all about security, compliance, and efficiency, and we have different features within those categories. Rob's going to get into that here in just a moment. And we always get asked this question, so I want to proactively let everybody know what the pricing structure looks like. So our standard price is $2 per endpoint in small volume, but as a MSP Success special for everybody who's on this call, whether you take advantage of the secure check audit or not, if you mention that you're on this call, we'll give you the special price of $1.50 per endpoint per month. And again, I don't want to belabor the point, but I highly encourage you, if you haven't already, please go to firmguard.com/TMT and sign up for the secure check audit. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. We've been doing these for quite a while, and we've got some very interesting results, which I'll share with you once you see the demo from Rob. With that, Rob, I'm going to hand it over.
While Rob's coming up there, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to launch a poll, guys, while he's getting his screen ready there. And it's going to ask you, if you're interested in learning more about Phoenix, the FirmGuard free scans. If you filled out the form on their website, perfect. We've got you covered. You can either double say yes, or just answer the poll, or just, fill out that form on that website. We just want to make sure everybody has access, to this wedge tool that you'll be able to use along with the training from Ray in order to put this into practice. It's free, so there's no reason why you shouldn't be doing this. At least get it, play around with it, run it on yourselves, eat your own dog food, give it to one of your techs or your team that kind of vets new technology, just play around with it. Real quick question, Rob, for you, and I guess maybe me as well, before you go in, but it's a little bit more of a technical question. And so we had a question, let me scroll back up in the chat, from Rich about how are these bad actors getting into the BIOS?
You want to take that, Rob? You want me to do it? Sorry, I'm not sure we can hear you, Rob, but I'll answer the question. So there are a variety of different ways that can happen. Sometimes, frankly, it's just via flaws within the operating system itself. So we have on our website, if you go to firmguard.com, there's a security notification section where we show you a variety of these different vulnerabilities that are out there, and they go by names like Black Lotus, Logo Fail, and so forth. And it describes specifically how those vulnerabilities came about, and some of them, frankly, are just flaws in Windows that get exploited, and then you can get down to the BIOS layer and cause problems that way.
Okay, perfect. I've got a couple other questions I'm going to save for the end, but I knew, Rob, you were coming up here to talk about and show a demo, and so I just wanted to snag you before you got started. So I will take this poll down here so that everybody can pay attention to your screen as you go ahead and get started on doing a demo of the actual product itself.
Thank you, Allison. Appreciate it. So yeah, my name is Rob Inman. I'm the director of product for the FirmGuard product at Phoenix. And, I'm sure you're probably curious as to, everything Amit talked about, how exactly can we do that? How can you use the tool? And I want to cover three main points here that Amit mentioned. So let me go ahead and start by sharing out my screen. And we start here at the FirmGuard dashboard. But I'm actually going to jump into the efficiency side of things. So one of the things that I keep seeing that partners talk to me is really giving you the ability to go into the BIOS remotely without having to put hands on the machine. Previously, at least back in my day, you used to actually have to, reboot the machine, figure out what the correct dev key was, get into the BIOS and make those changes. So as an example, if you take over a client, right? So you didn't initially set up those machines and you decide, well, I'm going to deploy BitLocker to all of these devices. And so you have your RMM deploy BitLocker out to the devices. And at the end of the day, you get errors on, a couple of machines, 5 machines, 10 machines, because the TPM chip wasn't set up correctly. So it didn't allow for the installation of BitLocker. Normally, again, you'd have to kind of put that aside and say, okay, we need to roll a truck out to that location, have a technician go on site and actually sit in front of those machines and change those settings to be able to do that. From our side of things, if you were using FirmGuard, we could come in here to the endpoint. And let me just pick, let's say this Dell. Come over to the secure config, which shows us and gives us access to the BIOS of this Dell machine. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of different sections to this Dell BIOS. So I'm going to use a search feature, and this is TPM, right? So I have one result, and I scroll down. Here it is. In this case, actually, this machine had the TPM 2.0 security on, but if this was unchecked, that could prevent the installation of BitLocker. So in that previous example, what your technician would do is take those machines, come in here, again, no visiting the client, make these changes, and then they could save the changes. You have a couple different options here. You can reboot the machine immediately, or you can select to schedule it. That way you can do it after hours if you don't want to interrupt the user. But once that machine comes back online after the reboot, it'll have the changes that you made in the BIOS. So now the next step is you can redeploy BitLocker, and because you have your TPM settings set up correctly, that's now going to work. So the work gets done a lot quicker. The client is set up in a safe, with BitLocker enabled. So everything is done a lot quicker. Another one that I hear a lot of is wake on LAN. Someone forgets to set that. Again, I can just do a search for wake, have 3 results here, not looking for wake on dock, but here's wake on LAN. So again, I can come down here and change the wake on LAN settings from here, reboot the machine. And now again, I can use the RMM to go ahead and go in and use my wake on LAN feature to wake that machine in the future. So that's one of the things that a lot of our partners are really excited about. Again, not having to deploy technicians on location to do things like this. We've also worked with people that have remote help desks, right? So again, let the help desk take care of it instead of getting a technician involved. So with that being said, let me go back to the dashboard because I do want to also talk about the security aspect of this. So you'll notice that we do have this endpoint health widget here. And for example, this is showing me how many machines have secure boot disabled. Now, I would venture to say that if I were to ask you how many machines in your environment have secure boot disabled, you probably don't have that answer for me. You don't have something that can show you that secure boot is disabled. And like Amit was saying, secure boot is something that is put in place to prevent some changes in the OS where someone can kind of hide in the background and just, do things that they shouldn't be doing. So it's something from the security side that you definitely want to have enabled, and you want to make sure that you get alerted if it's not enabled. But to fix this issue, again, it's something that needs to be done in the BIOS. So in the same vein, I can come over here to this alert. I can see my machines that have secure boot disabled. This happens to be a Lenovo. I can go to my secure config, open up my BIOS settings. And again, I have all of my Lenovo BIOS settings available to me here. But the one I'm looking for is here, right under security, secure boot. Same thing, secure boot in this case is disabled. So I can check that, click save. I have my same options to do an immediate reboot or a scheduled reboot. So again, once this machine comes back online, now the machine is going to have secure boot enabled from that point forward. So you can make sure that the OS is booting how it's supposed to be booting without any, issues that may happen from a bad actor influencing that. Now, the other one that I want to touch on is really has to do with compliance. It's a little bit of remote and compliance, and it has to do with our secure wipe. Now, again, let me bring up an example. If you have a doctor's office, of course, they want to maintain their HIPAA compliance. So if you are removing a group of machines from that doctor's office, you have to make sure that the patient data gets removed securely from those drives. Now, I used to actually have a technician go on site, remove the drive from the machine, come back to the office. I didn't have a shredder. I used magnets, but I had other people that I knew that had shredders where they would actually shred the hard drive. And I mean, obviously it works. The data is completely gone, but it can get a little expensive. So in this case, when I come here to my secure wipe screen, I can see the drives that are in this machine. I can select all the drives on the machine, or I can just select one drive. Then I click wipe drive, and I have my wipe options. So these are the different algorithms that we use. And again, it depends on the compliance that your client wants to maintain. You can choose the different ones all the way down to US DOD. We have some international, British, Canadian, German, US Navy and Air Force. So again, you select what you want to use here for the wipe. When you click erase, of course, you're going to get a warning that you're not going to come back from that. And you also have the option to do this immediately or schedule that out. So once that starts, which I'm not going to do on this machine, but and it completes, and this is really the important part, I think, at least when it comes to compliance, is you will have a certificate of erasure available to you. And that's what you're going to be able to give to the client. And then when that auditor comes knocking and says, hey, you just got rid of 10 machines, how can I make sure that you're still HIPAA compliant? How can I make sure that the data on those machines is completely gone? You see here that you have the information of the drive, the serial number, the date and time, and the erasure method that was used. So the auditors are going to look at this and say, okay, this guarantees that the data has been wiped to conform to whatever compliance that client is trying to maintain. So those are really the 3 points that I wanted to cover. Of course, I would definitely want you to sign up for our audit so that we can, talk more one-on-one and, go into maybe particular use cases that you may have. And of course, you can try the product and see how it works in your environment. But I don't want to take up too much time because I know that we have some questions and answers that we want to get to, and we're coming up to the top of the hour. So I will give it back to Amit.
All right. Thanks, Rob. Hey, so one thing I just want to throw some statistics out to folks. So when you do the secure check audit, as I said, we've been doing this for a while now. We've actually found, over our past secure check audits, that about 16% of endpoints had secure boot disabled. So, obviously tremendously vulnerable. And about 10% were in what we call legacy BIOS mode, which essentially means those machines are old and should be removed from circulation. Allison, we want to go to the Q&A now. I think there's a few questions.
I've been holding a couple different questions, so thank you guys for being patient. Maybe it would be helpful. I've got a couple different pricing questions here and kind of what's included. So if you want to maybe bring up that slide, Amit, with the pricing.
Yeah,
I think I got, I'm scrolling back up. I think I got Joshua's question answered. It was which offerings does that $1.50 per endpoint cover? Is it the entire suite? And so, I'd answer, so yes, it is the entire suite. So everything that Rob was just showing, is for that price.
Correct. Yeah, there it is right there.
Yeah,
that's right. It covers everything. So, and also the secure check audit, you get everything there as well, the for 15 days. So it's not stripped down or anything like that. It's exactly what you would get with the product for that $1.50.
Okay, and then I've got a question here from Anthony. Is there a minimum of 100 endpoints required to sign up?
Yes, it's 100 endpoints minimum. That's correct.
Okay, so we got that one. Okay, a couple different questions in terms of compatibility. So I'm going to kind of try to combine them together a little bit here. So I've got to meet, what is BIOS? So what is FirmGuard compatible with? Fernando, Windows only, or will it work on Windows, Unix, Linux, Mac, iOS, Android? So when do you want to take that and kind of talk about compatibility?
Sure.
Rob, you want to take it? Go ahead.
Sorry. So it is Windows right now. We are working on a Linux driver so that, because it's basically the same hardware that you're running on a Linux device. So very similar BIOS, same UEFI, same type of issues you might have on a Linux device. Currently, it is Windows. We will be having a Linux distribution soon. As far as other things like Mac and mobile devices, what we found is because those devices, they control the hardware and the software, right? So let's take a Mac as an example. You know, they make the hardware, they make the software. So all of those configurations are done at the software level. So if you do a software update, it's going to be doing the BIOS update. If you do any changes, you do it from the software level. There's none of that, you know, like that blue BIOS screen that you used to be able to see, although now they've made them prettier than that, in the Windows machines that you can get into to make the changes that I just showed you before.
Okay.
I did see another
I
question.
think there was a question around deployment too, like how do you deploy?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
FirmGuard?
Fernando had asked, what does it take to initially set up FirmGuard on an endpoint?
So it is an install of an agent, in this case, a Windows agent, like I mentioned. Most of our clients are using their RMM. We have PowerShell scripts or CLIs scripts that you can use to use your RMM to deploy the agent out to the endpoints.
Okay. I think those were all the questions that I had seen. Just scrolling up in the chat. It's easy for me to lose them in the chat, but I think that was everything. I know there was a CrowdStrike question that you were able to answer, Rob, for Andre. So thank you for doing that. Okay. So, any last words from, oh yeah, you got one more. What is it, Rob?
Talk about compatibility, one last thing, because I did say Windows, but let me also talk about the hardware. So, some of you might remember Phoenix, we are a BIOS manufacturer. So I did want to say that it's not just Phoenix BIOSes, right? So we do work on Dell's, HP's, Lenovo's, the Microsoft devices, Surface devices.
Right.
So it will work on those devices. And then I do see a question from Tony that there is their own utility. And you know what? That is correct. Dell does have their own utility, but you may come across a mixed environment, right? So instead of having various tools where you have to use Dell on your Dell machines and a different tool from a different manufacturer on their machines, we're trying to give you one tool that can handle different machines from one place.
Yeah, that's a very key point, is that FirmGuard is designed to work in a heterogeneous environment. And we've had a lot of our MSPs, the way they characterize it is when you're going to do configuration, for example, BIOS configuration, it all looks the same. So whether you've got a Dell or you've got an HP or a Lenovo or what have you, the mechanism that you use to make those changes is all standardized. It looks the same. It's exactly the way Rob showed it.
Okay,
And
I've got one more in here in the Q&A. I don't know if you guys have access to the Q&A or not, but Fernando asking, will it work with VMware or other virtualizers?
right. So when you spin up a VM, it usually spins up a virtual BIOS, right? So will we work with it? Yes, we will work with it, but there's kind of limited functionality because of the fact that it is a virtual BIOS. However, one of the things about getting that Linux agent out there is more specifically than just Linux, we've been getting a lot of requests to get an ESXi agent that you can put on the bare metal hypervisor so you can get information on the BIOS that's on that hypervisor, which is more important really than the BIOS that's on the VM itself, which, like I mentioned, it's a virtual BIOS. And Allison, I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm seeing the questions. I can jump in and answer them.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah,
Go for it, Rod.
I'd say, yeah, let's take this question, and then, if you've got more questions, go ahead and just sign up for the scan, because as soon as you sign up for the scan, it'll give you access to a calendar. Maybe it is with Rob, but I know you've got a whole team who kind of answers those questions. So even if you've got, even more, go ahead and just do the scan, get on live with them and talk. So, but yeah, let's do Fernando's last question.
Sure thing. So yes, so the answer is it is very easy to remove. It sits in add remove programs, so it can be removed. In fact, I have had the question of, oh well, that means anyone can remove it. And in a sense is yes, if you have admin rights to the computer, you can remove it. We're not trying to take the computer hostage. If you have concerns about end users removing the program, well, then you just limit their access to not being able to add or remove programs to that machine. But we also do provide scripts for, mass uninstalling if you want to use your RMM, things like that.
Okay. Great. Well, you guys, this was a fantastic session. I know Ray, earlier had to leave, but being able to kind of learn high level Wedge, then take it and see an actual tool, that can implement it. And so thank you so much for giving us on a practical tool in order to do that. Lots of questions from you guys on getting access to the recording and getting access to the slides. And some people even wanting to swipe, your slides and meet so they can show it to their clients and help to like prove to them this is why you need it.
We can certainly arrange that, Allison.
Yeah, so we'll
Happy
be
to share
putting
the slides.
Yeah, up on the we'll be putting the slides up on the same page as the recording so that you guys will have access to both Amit and to Ray's. So any final comments from you, Amit?
No, just